Tunataka mtu aseme my friend.
Ndio hiyo ni kama inakuwa live streamed.
I think so.
We are live.
We are live. Thank you so much, Kiprop, for taking us live into YouTube. My name is Thomas Musau, with my co-host Francisco Bugwa. Today we are talking about the state of the nation, which is about what is happening in Kenya. We have two guests who we are going to dissect what is happening with them. On my right on the screen, I have Alex Kamau. Please, Kamau, can you say hello and tell us something about yourself, where you are from, and yes, and then you go to the next person.
My name is Alex Kamau. I live and work in the UK. I am obviously Kenyan. I'm from a county called Kiambu. And I very, very, very loyal to my country, very patriotic. I wish things were working better. I am very, very, very passionate out for my country, not for what I can get, but for what Kenya has done for me. And I am pleased to be here just to hear the views of other people and also maybe to learn and share the little I know with them. I'm in the academic world. I'm a lecturer here in England. And it is much of what I have done for the better part of my life.
Thank you so much, Alex. Alex will be with us to talk about Kenya. As he has said, he's very passionate about Kenya. And like everybody else in the diaspora, we are all passionate. Unfortunately, we haven't had any chance to talk about Kenya at a channel where we talk just politics. And therefore, if you are into politics, this is where you need to be to share with us what you think about Kenya, what us as diasporans need to do to be able to make Kenya a better place to be. Next is Nelson. Welcome,
Hello,
Nelson.
guys. Thank you, Mr. Tom. So my name is Nelson Amenya, and I am here representing the Gen Zs and the millennials in this space today. And I am based out of Paris in France. I'm currently studying my Master of Business Administration. I'm very passionate about our country and the development. And politics and the economy go hand in hand. And that's why I'm so passionate about it and for the future of our country. And I know today we're going to dissect much about it, and I'm very excited about it. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Nelson. Happy to have you on board, all the way from Paris, and Alex from London, and my co-host, Mr. Francisco Bugwa. You have something to say before we continue, sir?
Yes, thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you very much, Kamau, and the Gen Z representative on board. We are so excited tonight. Obviously, this is supposed to be our second online show talking about politics. I am originally from Kenya, born in Kenya, raised up in Kenya, from Kiambu. But I was born in Nakuru, but we moved down to Nairobi, where we lived in Kiambu. So Kamau, we come from the same kind of county. And, a couple of years back, I wasn't very involved in politics at all until about 2-3 years ago. My family is heavily involved in politics. I didn't want to go into that line, but you know what? If it's in you, it's in you. You can't escape it. You can't run away from it. Our country is in need, dire need of people like us who can speak out and stand, for the marginalized and try and make things better, like the guys Gen Z are doing today. So we are here to back you up and talk and open up and discuss the ongoing crisis to that, the last couple of days, what is unfolding in Kenya. And we are happy to talk any topic tonight. Thank you so much, Thomas. Back to you.
No worries. Thank you so much. I'm quite excited as well to have you on board, and we are going to help each other in making this program a success. Right. Today's topic is about revolution in Kenya. Of course, when we talk about revolution, it's not always about a coup or anything to do with killing and taking power by force. It is a change, which a time comes and the people say, enough is enough, we need a change, and it could be peaceful, sometimes it can be through killings, but we hope Kenya will not get there. But we have experienced a lot of things happening, and we have a Gen Z representative here. Tell us what is happening in Kenya and why you, what happens, where have you been, why now? When Baba was there, and he gave you all the back, the support, but you didn't do anything. Why have you decided this is the time? Tell us why. You are muted, Nelson.
Sorry about that. So thank you, Thomas, for Tom, for this wonderful question. And yeah, the question why now and what's happening in Kenya. And I just want to say that we are so excited as the young people in Kenya, and this time is the time we've been waiting for. Someone said that the chicken have come home to roast. So it's a wonderful time to be in Kenya. And for a long time, we have been in the sidelines. We have not actively participated in politics. Many young people have deliberately kept off politics because we thought politics is for the old people and for losers. But it has come a time when we have been awakened by the times. Right now everything is so hard, and I think one of the things that made the people to just come out is how our leaders have been so arrogant online. If you go to, for example, on Twitter, right now it's called X, and you see how the rhetoric of some of the leaders in government, and you see how they reply to us, because on Twitter it's very interactive. We are able to speak to our leaders and they can respond back on the platform. So it's very interactive platform, and you see the way they speak to you in such an arrogant manner, and they were doing this for so long. And I remember about a few weeks ago, actually about 2 weeks ago, there was one leader who told us that we are just online wankers and we don't have any threat. There's nothing we can do, as in we're just shouting online. I think this is the straw that broke the camel's back and led the people to the streets. When you push someone to the corner every day,
Yes.
one day it will reach a point where they will have to push back. So I think this is the point where now they are pushing back, and so many Gen Zs and millennials were obviously very ignorant about politics and governance. And you can see how on TikTok, on Twitter, they're trying to educate themselves. They're trying to read the finance bill. The finance bill is just like it's just a tool that people are using, but you can see how people are trying to read it. People are trying to even read the Constitution at this time. Nobody in my age would try to read the Constitution, but they're dissecting it. Right now on Twitter, we have X spaces and people are dissecting the land freehold and leasehold. People didn't even know these things. You see, it's like a big awakening that was caused by the arrogance of some leaders. Yeah, so this is why now.
I remember. Thank you so much. I'm 100% sure. Everybody is also wondering whether you guys understand what you are up to, because some of the people probably they have not read the Constitution, but it's a wave of change.
Yeah.
Some people will just join. I know I engaged some members of Gen Z who are currently planning a demo on Tuesday here in London, and I said, you guys are very powerful. What happens if the president decides now I'm going to Uganda, I'm going to fly out of the country because the heat is too much? what are you going to do with the country? He said, I'm not actually sure what we are going to do. So you can imagine they are doing this, but they don't know the seriousness of the whole thing. And was asking me, tell us, what should we do if that happened? I said, it's not possible for an African president to do that unless things have gotten very hot and probably his life and his family is in danger. But usually there would be somebody would be acting, will be there in acting capacity until an election is held. Probably there would be a state of emergency, stuff like that. But let's see, let us look at back where we have come from to this level where the young people have to rescue Kenya. Where did the rain start beating us? Alex, where did the rain start beating Kenya? And do you think this is the time to rescue Kenya, or you think there's still a window for change for the current government?
To be honest, Musao, I think if many times when somebody asks me, what have you learned after being in Europe for quite a number of years, I always tell them the one thing I have learned is just how much these countries try to document their history. They try to keep an account of what has happened before. And using that history as a point of reference, they avoid the very many mistakes that we find ourselves committing in Kenya year after year after year. And I will tell you this, if you really think about it, I normally say, if I look at Kenya today, the mistakes or the things which are happening now have not been sold. To be honest, they have not been sold solely on the doors of President William Ruto. And I think if you were to do that, we would be disaggregating our duty as sober opinion leaders or people who are able to express things and express them correctly. I just want to tell you two things. That if I look at the presidencies that we have had in our country since independence, I will begin with Kenyatta the senior. Maybe the millennium may not understand this, but this probably could be an opportunity for them to understand this history. That we come from the colonial period, and Kenya is born as a nation in 1963, or so we are told. And the Kenyatta presidency was one of deference. You know, people deferred to people simply because they are in office. There was an opportunity to have a new nation, a nation that was free from colonialism, but unfortunately that didn't happen because unknown to very, very, very many people. I think the independent settlement was one agreement that was quite disjointed and very, very, very heavily in favor of the colonizers. And what we had was a new group of leaders, a new group of rulers, a significant number of whom had received their education abroad, predominantly in Europe, Kenyatta being among them. Because if you look at Jomo Kenyatta today and you look very, very carefully about the aristocratic landowners in Europe, they have very, 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 very similar characteristics. Now, so the Kenyatta administration was one of deference, and sadly, it is one which, in my view, embedded corruption or tribalism as a currency of politics. And that needs to be said. These were the first 15 years up to 1978. President Moi takes power. And for all those communities in Kenya who felt they had been marginalized by Kenyatta the senior, he became the standard bearer of hope to them. He told them, look, I can include you in government, and this might explain a significant number of members today are actually from the smaller tribes in Kenya, and fewer of them from the major ones. In fact, somebody just mentioned a few weeks ago, I think about 2 months ago, this was Governor Natembeya, that despite the Luyas being the second largest community in Kenya, they have never produced a head of the military at all, not the chief of defense forces. And if you extend that argument from the analogy I have just given you, you can understand actually why. So this is a Kenyatta administration, and then we transition on to the Moi administration. Tragically, the Moi administration then, their currency of operation was fear, control, and tyranny. Those three things were the currency of those. I went to school during those years, and anybody who can recognize those times, that is exactly what happened. a significant number of those Kenyans in the diaspora today in their very late 40s and 50s, they actually left Kenya during that time of Moi. Then President Moi, he has his next 24 years, and then he bequeaths the country to President Kibaki in 2002. There is a sense of renewal. There is a sense that the country has sunk so far. There is nowhere further that it can go. We have President Kibaki, well-meaning, and I still remind you, this becomes now our second president who had received his education or a part of education in an elite British institution called the London School of Economics. Now, the thing is, whereas Kibaki meant well for the country, I think he quickly became captive by a cabal whose memory and nostalgia was about going back to Kenyatta One. And that needs to be told. These are people mainly who had made money during the Kenyatta One tenure, as senior civil servants, or maybe people who held positions of one kind or the other, Mishuki being notable among those. And we have all this optimism. For the first time, Kibaki and Raila are together, but within no time, things fall apart again. And the seeds of that time, and if you ask me, 20 years later, the problem we would have solved then is actually what is being manifested by the gens now, because Kibaki was able to address the economic side of the country and actually, give the country some kind of economic renewal. But on the politics side, the currencies and the politics of corruption, the politics of patronage, the politics of tribalism were largely untouched, and that was left there. The event that precipitated the Madras time in 2007 can be traced back to the reneging of the promise or the agreement that had taken place between Kibaki and Raila. And so we have that period. Kibaki and Raila agrees again that we are going to have a truce. I'll become prime minister, you can become president. And we have now this parallel government where we had Raila saying one thing in the morning and President Kibaki overruling him in the afternoon. And we had that chaotic period. We now then have another, what I would call a marriage of convenience between two suspects, between President Kenyatta the Jr. and and President Ruto, who was then the deputy president. And sorry, who was not the deputy president, but was one of the suspects for the ICCs. And that is a chapter of our country that we probably do not want to dwell a lot. But understanding that is very, 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 very important to where we find ourselves today. So they cobble together a coalition to help themselves or to insulate themselves from the criminal consequences of the very, 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 very heinous crimes they had been accused for at the ICC. They take power in 2013. The country feels there is some kind of healing because for the first time, once again, in almost since 1994, the Kalejins and the Kikuyus are on the same side. The two communities who since independence have occupied the office of president. So there was a sense of resignation on the part of Kenyans, where Kenyans have said at times we would rather trade liberty and lasting freedom for the convenience, for the temporary convenience that peace brings. And that is the presidency that follows. Now, I would describe that presidency as initially one that had optimism, but one that descended into chaos rapidly, quickly. And what we had was almost a repeat of the Kibaki and Raila disagreement, where we almost have two centers of power, the president who is firmly in charge, but also ministers or part of senior government officials who are aligned to his deputy. We know how things go, and we have a situation that precipitates the events of 2022, where the deputy was able to systematically undermine his boss and capture the presidency. What the President Ruto, failed to do was to be able, what he did, that in my view, that I would say was a mistake, was to end up promising people candy floss and chocolate in a country which was facing monumental problems at a time in the world where there were challenges and difficulties that Kenya would have to go through, which were outside the control or the province of Kenya. COVID among them, and also global events that actually spiked the cost of living. And I normally tell people, at the end of the day, we've got to ask ourselves, what is politics? And whatever anybody else tells you, politics is about the control of the factors of production. It is about who produces, how they produces it, and for who they produce those things. And what happened then is that Deputy President Uhuru, Deputy President Ruto at that time was able to coalesce the collective anger and the difficulties of the Kenyan people, and lay them squarely at the door of President Uhuru and his new partner Raila Odinga. He was able to signpost them, package them, and present them as being the post boys, the sort of boogeymen who represented everything that had gone wrong in Kenya for the last 60 years. Now, here we had a young generation of people that were Christian hustlers, and they bought this narrative because many of them had a scant understanding of the events that I have described for you since 1963 and how we had found ourselves there. Now, I want to remind you that President Ruto had served in the administration of Moi, he had served in the administration of Kibaki, and he had served in the presidency of Uhuru as his deputy. He understood very well the politics of patronage. He understood very well the politics of dividing people and clustering them into groups and presenting their grievances as being caused by a group other than themselves. Other than giving them the liberation of telling them, look, the only lasting liberation as a country is going to come from equity, from fairness, from the rule of law, and the dismantling of tribalism, which has crippled and stifled Kenya, in my view, where all I care to do in Kenya today, if you look at the appointments throughout the years, the appointments to the most sensitive government positions will normally tend to mirror who is in office at that particular time. It was true during Kenyatta, it was true during Moi, it was true during Uhuru, and President Ruto has followed the same script. The only difficult is that during the first two presidencies, notably the one of Moi and the one of Kenyatta, access to information, especially in real time, was quite an obstacle. Now, the Kibaki presidency, and we've got to give credit to Mutahi Kagwe, he's the person who literally almost single-handedly ensured that the communication renewal, our access to the information actually came at that time, that Kenyans can be able to check these things and, clarify things for themselves, check facts, back the argument through data. And this generation is a generation which actually we have actually come to call today the Gen Zs. That these are people who are able to interrogate issues. They are able to look at facts. They are not beholden to the history that so many of us are beholden to. And they are looking at it and saying, hang on, here I am. I can hear that our current president probably maybe has been implicated in one or two of corruption scandals before. I can see him living big, and the people around him are living big. I have done my best to try and get some education, and I cannot get a job. And the first time I get a small income from TikTok, from social media, from where, they want to come and tax me to the bone. And these people have started.
Alex, stop there. I want to ask Francisco to tell us how the social media has influenced what is happening now, because Alex has explained to us very well where the problems has come from and how now the Gen Z has now come into place and is trying to revolutionize everything, to give Kenya a rebirth. Has social media helped? And if so, do you think this is the solution? Is it a permanent solution? Or what do you think is going to happen from here on? I'll get back to you, Alex, to continue from there.
Thank you very much, Alex. Alex, you've actually said a lot of what I would have also wanted to talk about in the past. But right now, okay, we got a question here from Thomas about the social media and the power of social media. Well, the truth is, we are moving very fast into the new modernized world, if you know what I mean. And I think it is true to say that things have changed. The times during our times, the Moi times and the Kibaki times and the last, and what do you call him, the Uhuru time, things are really changing. We are coming to a generation where things like social media become very powerful tools. I mean, you've seen this happening everywhere. We've seen how the power of social media has been, has been used like for example in America by President Donald Trump. And we can see where this young generation, they have discovered a more powerful tool than the traditional way of doing things, the way we used to do them, campaign, the normal campaign that we would go with trucks like we did 2 years ago, me and you, Thomas, and went around and tried to speak to people directly and engage with people physically. There is a fear that I feel like we need to be very careful about. You said a while ago that you asked some of them what would happen if the president was to quit or was to run away, if it was to come to that point and he decided, you know what, I think the pressure is too much, I may have to exit. What would happen? See, this is the question we should be asking ourselves and ask the Generation Z. They are doing an incredible thing. They've woken up so much that we have so much to worry about. We have to worry about the next thing that would happen, the worst case scenario. If they were to go, like they're saying they would go to the State House today, because they would through the social media, the way they're doing things, coordinating from different towns. Somebody in Nyahururu is coordinating with somebody in Mombasa. Somebody in Kisumu is coordinating with those in Nairobi. And the power of this coordination, we have to ask ourselves, what is the worst case scenario if this is not under control in some way? And if they do this not knowing what would happen if the president was to quit today or step down, who would be or who would take it?
Gen Z representative, please answer this question. What is the plan B now? Assuming tomorrow we wake up, there is no President Ruto. What is the plan? Do you have a president in waiting, or you still think that gap will get somebody as soon as possible? What's the plan? Do you know? Or maybe you can still speculate. Nelson.
Hi, Thomas. Can you repeat the question?
I'll repeat the question. The question is this. You wake up tomorrow, what is your main agenda for? I know every chant is Ruto must go, Ruto must go, Ruto must go. Good, brilliant. What's the next plan? What's the plan after that? If he goes tomorrow, what's the plan?
Thank you, Tom. Very interesting question. And actually, many people have been asking this question. And I think this is not the right question to ask. Regardless, I will answer anyway, because the right question is not if Ruto will go, because it's actually quite difficult for Ruto to leave office. He cannot just vacate that office. And even if people march to State House, it will be, it will not be like Sri Lanka, where the people marched to State House and they kicked out the president and the next day he resigned. No, this doesn't happen in Africa. I haven't seen it yet. And if the Gen Zs and the millennials would gather strength and courage to do it, they would probably die in the process in State House. But Ruto, first of all, the only way he can be ousted is to be impeached by Parliament. And at the moment, Parliament is not with the people. Majority of Parliament is siding with the government. And that means there is no way he can be impeached. The only way he can be impeached is if we have the numbers in Parliament. And this brings me to a very important point. The
impeachment is possible with the kind of leaders we have in the parliament?
At the moment, no, it's not possible, because we had 205 MPs voting yes for the second reading of the finance bill, and only 115, I think, voted against it. That means that we do not have the tyranny of numbers to impeach the president. And the only way our next step is only to start calling the MPs who are not representing the people. And we have seen MPs say in public that their master is President Ruto. And some even, they said they owe allegiance to the president, not the voters. And they said it's the party that the president heads that elected them, not the people. So these are the kind of MPs we need to recall. And after we recall these kind of MPs who are not representing the people, because the MPs are supposed to represent the people, that's why they are elected by the people. And once they are recalled, then now we can discuss how we can oust the president, Ruto. But at the moment, we cannot discuss about this unless we want to do a coup. But this is a long shot, and we don't want our country to end up like Sudan or Somalia. So yeah, we have to do these things in having in mind that we don't want to lose our country in the process.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Obviously, as you said, an African president would rather die than to fly away and hide somewhere. They
Exactly.
love that too much. And this brings us to the second question, and this is about the current bill. And I'll go back to Alex. Alex, take us through this bill. What do you think of? What do you think? Why is everybody so much against this bill? Is it the worst that Kenya has ever had, or is it just because we are becoming more aware of our rights? Why is it such a why is it causing such a hullabaloo? What's the question? What's the big deal?
To be honest, Musau, I will take you back because you will never be able to understand a history, a country well in the current state of the country before you go back to its history. I just want to remind you, I remember in the 1990s, and even earlier than that, watching the then Minister for Finance. I watched Mudavadi, I watched Professor Saitoti, I watched a gentleman called Masahalia, I watched Kimunya, and many, many others. And all the government would bring to Parliament then were just estimates that nobody had heard about. They would just appear in Parliament. They were not printed anywhere in the newspapers. If they were printed at the government office, you would not be able to see them. And I remind you that the change that has happened in this digital age, where people can be able to look at this document, the finance bill is 136 pages. Now, the Gen Zs do not need to go anywhere. They can be able to access it on their phone. They can conveniently be able to look at it and be able to see this does not work for us and this is simply not fair. Now, the thing is, the reason why this bill is not contentious because of much of what is contained there, it is a contrast that is the president demanding of Kenyans to make bigger and more painful sacrifices at a time when they can see that the rulers are not themselves applying that same edict to themselves. That our country today has some of the highest paid politicians in the world, the highest paid politicians in the world, whose salaries are not touched, whose benefits are not touched. And they are insisting on taxing food, taxing bread, increasing VAT on bread, increasing taxes on sanitary pads of all these. And this is a president who has daughters, insisting that they tax things like diapers and the rest of those things. And when people contrast those things, and then entire dishonesty, because this is the other bit that has not been spoken a lot about, where what we believe was the core thing is that these things that I have mentioned, the VAT on bread, the taxing of diapers, the taxes on vehicles, the taxes on sanitary pads, regretful as that is, were simply decoys. They knew this would cause a lot of outcries, but alongside them, they actually contained the things that they were actually wanted to tax. For example, the eco levy on imported food, on imported goods, and I take that again, on imported goods. Now, this, we have been told ostensibly when the president stood with his parliamentary group and said, we have removed the contentious issues. What they did not tell us is that significant amount of the consumption element in Kenya is actually imported. They are goods that are bought from elsewhere, which means even when they remove the one on the domestic side, Kenyans will still have to pay a higher price by way of the things they buy in their supermarkets and so forth. And it goes back to our rulers, to what our rulers actually have done. Because for us to be living in a country where 60 years after independence, we are importing toothpicks, we are importing eggs, we are importing rice, we are importing flour, it is pathetic. And this bill, in my view, was almost that stage where Kenyans reached and they said, look, we have had enough. We cannot have this, and we need our voice to be heard. Unfortunately, the bulk of the taxpayers are people who would themselves be familiar with the presidencies I have told you about before. That there is an extent of a part of the deference that came from the original Kenyatta administration, part of the fear that comes from the Moi administration, and part of the optimism that says we are still resilient, we'll still be able to come over this at some point. But this is where the Gen Z is coming. These are restless. They are people who believe things can happen, then they can happen tomorrow. And they have stood up and said, what their parents and those of their age set were not able to do, they will be able to say it themselves, and they are going to express it using a strategy that the previous generations hadn't done. Because for all his greatness, and with due respect to Raila, Prime Minister Raila Odinga, the demonstrations he led before were violent, but these ones were largely peaceful, they were civil, they were coordinated, and importantly, they were leaderless. And there is nothing as dangerous as this spontaneous kind of protest to the streets. These spontaneous voices of people saying, we know what is wrong, you are not going to pull wool over our eyes, this is what we are going to do. And I think we have got to see these things from that context. And I hope if there's one conversation that we need to get from this, Musau, and I'll keep repeating this every time I have an opportunity like this, our country's history needs to be documented and taught to our people, our kids, including the millennials and the Gen Zs, so that they have a reference point to be able to see that they may be doing today what other braver people like the Orengos of this world, like the Getobu Manyaras of this world, did in the 1990s, nearly 40 years ago. The difficulty being that for some of these people, when they then took power themselves, they became no better than the rulers they had opposed before.
Thank you. I totally agree with you. There is a lot that needs to be done, and especially on how the money raised needs to be used. And this is historical. And particularly the issue of saying, yes, this is the money that we need. And how is it being used? That is a contentious issue. At our age, 60 years, we should not be relying on foreign aid or loans to finance our economy, to finance our services. Something is not right. And I wanted Francisco to tell us, what do you think of expenses involved with the current government versus what is being asked is going to the public service? Do you think this is money that is going to serve us, or it's a story of getting and enriching oneself? What do you think, Francisco?
I think, Musau, to start with, if we're gonna talk about money and the funds and and how much is going back into the country versus how much is going to people's pocket, I think part of why these Gen Z are this crazy and mad, and I can feel it, and I know I feel it so bad because I feel the same way they feel right now. The anger, the kind of misappropriation of funds, the level and the degree at what this government is misusing the public funds, it's honestly annoying, and it's making people it's getting to people's nerves. And I think part of this Generation Z, their anger really is not much about Ruto himself as a person or the president. The problem with them, I think, is how their money is being misused and going to the wrong pockets. I mean, for example, how can you explain somebody talking about 800 million that you don't have to ask what this money is for? You're not allowed to know what this money goes to. You should talk about this money, but is there in the budget 800 million when we have, I think, 250 million, proposed to be given to the youth, You imagine the difference between 250 million going to the youth and 800 million that is there and you shouldn't question about. Think about
Not
the wives of the
accountable.
president and the deputy president. Think about in 2024 right now. I think if you look at how much Rachel Ruto has been, how much fund has been, directed to her in terms of being the second, the second lady, and versus Gachegua's wife Dorcas. You tell me one person being allocated 800 million.
And it's illegal office. It's not in the constitution, isn't it,
It
Alex?
is illegal, exactly. This thing is not even in the office, and this is why I tend to think this money is there for a purpose. I think they put this money to use it, to fund their bad manners, I would call it, of funding what he went to do today in Nyahururu. Money is being used for sectarianism, if you know what I mean, which is a phenomenon where they use politicization of religion and ethnic identities. They use religion, to get to their people, if you know what I mean. The amplification of differences and the creation of us versus them through sectarianism.
Yeah.
And this is why people are very angry. If you can ask the guy representing the General Z right now, I don't think their problem is the president. I don't think their problem is the deputy. I think their problem is the money and where the money is, the funds. Where is this fund going? And why is this fund going to the wrong places? And when it's going back to these pockets, which are, so what? How about the economy?
Exactly. Now, we go back to Nelson. Nelson, we understand that... yes, Alex.
Before we go back to the Gen Z, I just want to tell you, I told you before about, the idea of defiance. You defer to people simply because they are in an office, and you imagine we cannot question this person. He's the headmaster, and we are socialized through that in school. He's the chief. He's a DC, he's a county commissioner, he's a president, and nobody interrogates. When you tell people in Kenya's constitution, there is no office of the first lady, there is no office of the second lady, there is no office of the prime cabinet secretary, they are surprised. Those offices are not there. And Musau, I want to show
is being given
to build up on what
escort cars. Tens of them everywhere they are going. And it's not constitutional.
I want to tell you this, which is something very, 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 very sad. If you look at the amount that the presidency spent last year, the money that was spent by Ruto, by Gachagua, by their spouses for the last 1 year, and you put that money cumulatively, because there is a lot that is normally not mentioned, and they will ask for some appropriations. They will ask to be added, that this money be topped up. It comes to about 6 billion Kenya shillings. 6 billion shillings between 4 people. For this financial year, the county of Nyeri, with 759,000 Kenyans, 759,000 Kenyans, was allocated 6.7 billion Kenya shillings. 6.7.
Clearly, we don't have leadership.
Only 700 million more than the 4 of them. Than the 4. And we don't ask in the question, Musau, the lives that these people live, I am telling you, not to be able to afford that kind of money. And we are there in defiance, saying, really mama, we are not going to attack. It's terrible.
This is where the problem is, because people want to pay tax, but the problem is, where's the tax going? And that is what Francisco has also said. One issue that also we wanted Nelson to come back to tell us is Ruto and is being accused of being a puppet of the West. What is your opinion on this?
Well, thank you again, Thomas and Alex and Francisco. You've raised very valid points regarding the way our money is used. And lately, people have been saying that we don't have a revenue collection problem. We have an expenditure problem. The way we spend our money, we blow money like we are the richest country in the world. And so this is our problem. We don't have financial discipline, and it starts from the top, right from the president down to the very bottom of our government and even in society. You can see it. There is no financial literacy, and this one is backed by our poor education system that does not prepare us to manage our finances properly. And you can see it in our leadership as well. And I just want to talk about your question now regarding Ruto being a puppet of the West. And this is not news. It's not even a secret that the West has been using African leaders ever since they relinquished colonialism. They have been using African leaders. Actually, what I just want to take you back to when we had tribal chiefs that were representatives of the colonial masters in our society or in our country. And we used to have people like Senior Chief Koinange. I remember him so much because I grew up in Kiambu, on Kiambu Road. And our neighbor was actually, I think, his grandson. And so I know about Senior Chief Koinange, and if you look at their lineage at the moment, they're maybe in the second, third generation, and they're still very wealthy because when the colonialists left Africa, they had a plan, and the plan was to use the chiefs to continue ruling Africa after they leave Africa. And that's exactly what happened. So what they did is they took the children of the chiefs, took them to the UK, took them to the US. They went and did economics and, gave them a decent education so that when they come back, they come and rule on their behalf. And this plan is not a secret. It's there all over. If you read a book called the Diary of an Economic Hitman, you will see how they use African leaders as puppets so that they can continue to siphon our resources. And resources does not only mean natural resources, even our own young people. Right now, the president is busy telling us that he's securing deals to send young people to foreign nations to work there. And yet our own country needs these people. It needs the doctors, the nurses, and the engineers. But every day you're hearing, oh, we have a deal with Germany. Oh, we have a deal with the UK. Oh, we have a deal with Japan to take our people there.
I believe it.
Can you imagine? There is even deals to take people to go and be farmhands, people to work in farms in the UK, people to go and work in farms in Germany. Can you imagine this? Instead of improving our total factor productivity, our TFP is negative, since the only time our TFP growth rate was positive was in the 70s. Can you imagine? And after that, all through it has been negative. So our country has not grown. And specialist economists are saying that if Kenya continues in this trajectory of the economic growth rate, it will take us about 100 years to double our GDP. Can you believe it? So instead of our president, focusing on what will actually make us to be developed, he is only focusing on what the West wants. And it is true that to some extent, he is a puppet of the West, whether knowingly, unknowingly, or whether he's doing it for his own private interest, which, we have seen most of our African leaders have been doing it for their own interests. You will find that they will be told they will be given some apartments, some beach houses. Maybe they will be given some houses in Paris or in Washington, in the US for their family. They will be given nice education for their kids. They will only be given nice things only for them, but the country, they are sacrificing a whole nation for their own selfish benefits. And it's so evident when you see. Do you remember the WikiLeaks? The WikiLeaks that leaked the former president? They have, I don't know, offshore accounts. in these nations, and you will find this, they're called tax havens. These islands are owned by the West. They're owned by the UK. Switzerland is a big tax haven. The Canary Islands are owned by the UK. There are some islands owned by France that are tax havens. And we have something called the double Dutch sandwich that is used to evade tax. And the West, they know all these things. They know where our money that is in form of loans goes to when people steal it, but still they don't do anything. So, but I was speaking to a professor here, and we were actually discussing this topic, and we came to a conclusion that sometimes these leaders, they're in something called a catch-22. They're in a catch-22 situation where if they are not corrupt, they will either be killed or be ousted from power by other corrupt people. If they decide to lead the country in a trajectory of prosperity, they risk being elected out by more corrupt people and people who are willing to compromise for the sake of their own personal benefits. So this is a catch-22 for most leaders, and you could see it even when they were voting for the finance bill. Some MPs were in a catch-22 situation. Should I listen to my people or should I listen to Ruto because I have a tender with the government? I'm building a road and they're supposed to pay me. So who do I listen to? You see, this is where most leaders in Africa are caught. And well, obviously, you will choose to become a puppet because you have more benefit. If you choose to be the voice of your people, you will either be killed, you will either be ousted by a coup, or you're risking not being re-elected. So it's a very complex situation.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And obviously, yes, politics and the leadership is never very easy thing because there are so many factors involved. This question is to everyone, and it's an open question. It's regarding our role as diasporans in the running of the country, Kenya. Do you think we are given enough opportunity to share our experiences and the skills in Kenya, our country, Kenya? And if today you were told you decide what to do with all the people in the diaspora, use them in development of Kenya, what areas and how would you manage such a project? You were to write a proposal to say, this is how diasporans can become an asset to the country. I'm going to start with Francisco, please.
Well, thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you very much, Nelson, for everything you said about the previous question. It's so, you put it right, the right way and how really things should be. In terms of how we can help, to probably make our government or the governance in Kenya
Francisco, let me cut you short. 1 second. If there are any questions on the YouTube or Facebook, please post them to my WhatsApp for the WhatsApp group so that we can look at them at the end. And that will be the end of our discussion. If there are any questions or reactions that you want us to look at, I am not getting anything on my side. So I am hoping it's me who has not logged in properly. Go on, sorry, Francisco.
That's fine, Thomas. So quickly, I was going to say, we've been here in this country, for example, in the UK. I've been here the last 20-something years, and I've been paying taxes here. I see where my taxes go to. I go, like today, earlier when you called me, I was in the park. A park, I was seated freely with my family, having my dinner tonight, without fear of anybody coming to harass you or security issues or anything. See, you pay taxes and you expect the government to give you something back in terms of things like recreational parks, services like any services that the government is supposed to offer to the citizens, it has to be accountable. Your taxes must show, it must show your taxes and what your taxes are doing to the community and the people and to the citizen. And so, in simple, if I am paying taxes and I don't see what the government is doing with my taxes, then clearly there's no transparency. And I think what the government of Kenya need to do, we have to change the cycle of leadership. We have to change like the whole shebang. Everybody out, like these guys want Gen Z, and put people who are capable and transparent enough to put their budget in the right order and all the funds directed to the right projects where they're supposed to go to, and monitored with public participation, without any kind of hindrance. It has to be open.
Okay,
that's what I would say.
So you think our experience would help put things in order, because we have seen it work.
It's really to replicate what we are doing here. What is working here versus what is not working home. I mean, we are raising a lot of money in taxes back in Kenya, and there's a lot of money that can do so much in Kenya, but it's not going to anyone. It's not helping Kenyans. It's helping individuals, and this is where the problem is.
Can you imagine? Somebody is going on his private visit to the local shops and he's having escort cars. Here we find a prime minister in the shops carrying his own basket. You remember the time we saw Johnson, Boris, carrying his basket, doing shopping for himself because he was not on duty. Even when he's on duty, how many times have we seen Han, the mayor of London, taking a train to home? How many MPs do that? My local MP, I meet at my local shops all the time, and we say hello with each other. And these people, because they are not at work, you won't find a driver, you won't find a security with them, except when they go to an official visit where there's security an issue. The problem is how we manage our money, and that's a good thing. They can borrow from us. Unfortunately, they see us as a threat, and maybe Gen Z will recognize us when they kick the man out of State House. Next is Alex.
Musau, you've asked an important question. What is our role as a diaspora? And I will say this. The UK had a leader of the Labour Party in the 1980s called Michael Foot. And Michael Foot was very thoughtful, an old school academic. If I'm not wrong, I think he had studied philosophy at Oxford. And he actually coined this phrase that said that the pen is mightier than the sword. The pen is mightier than the sword. That sometimes we may not be able to do much, even in the midst of these difficulties and the chaos, the political chaos back home. But I think even having a conversation like the one we are having right now, conversations are going to dispense ideas and show people. And in fact, that's what I was saying. I really wish Dr. Agat was here, because we would need to make this forum as balanced as we can, so that we try to differentiate between the adversarial politics that we see at home and the need to be able to share ideas even when we disagree with people. Because in the midst of that disagreement, the answers that are going to take our country forward will be placed somewhere in the middle. To be able to listen to others, to listen to a gentleman like Nelson, and it's been my pleasure to meet you today, young man, so that at the end of the day, we can be able to ask ourselves, where do we take this forward? I watched something on, I think it is on KT, part of the Standard Media Group called The Situation Group, CT Moga and the rest of it. And I would encourage you to watch it, because from there I have learned quite a number of things. These people are not politicians, but they do bring people there who are able to talk about issues of the country, people who understand how things actually work, and people who, on many occasions, are not aligned to one camp or the other. They are aligned to the camp that we call Kenya, our country, because it's the only one that we have. So I think the diaspora would have a lot to offer Musau in terms of ideas, in terms of ways of doing things and doing things differently. and to also understand that the things that are going to transform Kenya will not come outside of the country. They will come from within us. We, the people that actually understand that country. Because if you think about what maybe the diaspora, the Kenyan diasporas have done back home, we probably have taken more people out of poverty than our country has done for the last 60 years. And that is not something we say or something which is said loudly. You know, the remittances that we have in Kenya today consistently rank among the highest providers of foreign exchange to the country. And you look at it, Musao, even right now when we are talking about the 7.2 trillion that President Ruto has borrowed in the first almost 1 year of his administration. Now, at times I normally say, because if we are able to establish that trust, I wish there was something like a diaspora board, you know, a board that is issued where the Kenyan government actually borrows money from us, who are actually outside of the UK, outside of Kenya, to be able to invest that money back home. Because one, we will be able to do it out of patriotism, and it will be able to channel money that the government can then use for the long-term projects and the long-term infrastructure of much needed projects in our country. Unfortunately, that would only happen when the citizens trust their government. And the difficulty with that is that we have not trusted our government for the last almost 60-something years. In fact, I can tell you here without fear of contradiction, the only government we came close to trusting was a Kibaki government of about 2002, 2003. But then after that, everything just went downhill. Because when people trust their government, they trust the government to do what is right for the country, to do what is good for the country. That is why, Musawi, you realize, if you look at the government papers, the bonds, the treasury bills, which are sold by the UK government, by the UK treasury, the US treasury, they pay interest rates of just maybe 2%, 1%, 3%, and so forth. Look at the ones in Kenya. Because priced in there is a government which is not functioning well. So the government has to pay a very, 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 very high price, even for domestic debt. So I think our role, as I've said, could be twofold. Of course, the dispensation of ideas is absolutely important. The sharing of know-how, I would encourage people, if it is Nelson, if it is Francisco, put your thoughts in writing. Let people read them and be able to see that and invite people into conversations, however difficult. Of course, the economic bit, especially maybe those who can be able to invest in things which are long-term, other than limiting the investment just to land and real estate, to try to invest maybe in things which maybe focus more on where you are looking at things which are going to bring solutions in the long term. You know, research and development, for example. You know, manufacturing, for example.
Okay. Thank you for that. You are having issues with the network, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
Before we continue, Nelson, you are next. Is your YouTube working okay?
Let me check.
You haven't checked.
Let me check.
I haven't seen any messages. If there is any question on YouTube or Facebook.
It's working. I can actually see some people. I can see Laban Misiano. He said hello. I can see the Mwai Sako.
Okay.
He said well said. Yeah. So I think we are loud and clear on the YouTube.
Good. No question has been asked.
No, but I encourage Laban and Ian to ask a question.
Yeah. Could you also tell them to subscribe, because when they subscribe, they will be notified when we have the next speaker. We are going to have a very big guest from Kenya on Sunday, same time. I don't want to say the name, but people must keep tuned for the next session. And we are going to have Nelson to have his contribution to this question, and then we shall be closing down for the day. Nelson.
Yes, Tom, could you repeat the question, because we've spoken a lot?
The question is contribution. What contribution can diasporans give to the Kenyan government or Kenya as a country that would benefit from based on their experience and skills gained from abroad?
I think there are so many things that the diaspora, the Kenyan diaspora, can help the country at this moment and even the government. Because if you're in the West, obviously you are seeing, you're using working systems, you're using the train every day, the public transport is working. If you go to the homes, everything is working properly, the roads are well built, the sidewalks are well maintained, everything is maintained irrespective of where it is, even if it's in the village, where a very remote place, everything will be working. The government services are in operation, and it doesn't matter whether it's the central government or the devolved government. Everything is working perfectly. And with this kind of exposure, we can help our country, because we have already this exposure. The people living in the US, living in Europe, in Middle East or in Asia, everywhere, they have this exposure that most Kenyans lack or do not have. And if we use it to our advantage and go back, and even some of these people are working in these institutions that are making these systems to work. And the only challenge is that most people in the diaspora do not want to go back home. They want to stay in their comfort zone, the comfort zone of something already built. And I just want to tell them that they need to go back home and build this system back in our own country. We don't want to be a diaspora that is so good outside and so comfortable in our comfort zone. You're working for Google or Microsoft or whichever big company. You're living in a nice place, you have internet, you have good roads, you have public transport. Alex just said that he was in a park and they were having dinner and everything is working perfectly.
Francisco.
We want you to go back to Africa, to Kenya, and make
And enjoy that.
Yes, and help the country to get there, not just, enjoying something that is already built. There's some people who died to build it in the UK. Someone actually died to liberate the UK and to have the industrial revolution in the UK. And we need to, go back to Kenya and make it happen as well. And we are in the right place to do it. We have seen it, we have experienced it, we have lived it, we are doing it. We only just need to make the bold move of going back to our country and doing it in our own country, not only just going on Christmas Day and spending time with family and then boom, going back to.
And if you are going to be given the opportunity to serve, because there is a difference between going back there and being even near where those opportunities are. So don't blame people who sit and think we wish, because sometimes I'll tell you from my experience, there are times you want really to go back, but you ask yourself, where are you going to start? A lot of people apply for jobs they don't get because jobs are not given according to competence, according to skills. It is who you know. So a lot of things need to be put in place. I was talking
Let me tell you, actually, let me cut you short on that. And let me tell you that you're actually wrong, because right now, Africa is about 100 to 150 years back than where Europe used to be. And why am I saying this? Because I'm saying this because about a century ago in Europe, people were not looking for jobs. They were creating the jobs. They were running to the patent office to register patents, to make companies, to bring up startups, to do industries. Guys were busy coming up with ideas, they were entrepreneurs at that time. And that is what developed the country. So if you want to go back to Kenya or Africa in general, you're not going to look for a job. You're going to make the jobs, create the jobs, become an entrepreneur.
I like that.
Nelson,
No wonder you are called Gen
Nelson,
Z.
Nelson,
Francisco.
Musau,
Yeah,
Musau,
go on.
on that one, I have something to say. Nelson, you say it's easier said than done.
It's
You know,
hard.
and the
It's not
truth is, we
easy.
don't have a conducive environment to do everything that you want to do.
Okay.
If you don't have good governance to start with, if you
And
have
the
the kind of
capital.
mentality, the kind of mentality of our leaders that we are here and it's our time, Yagugura.
Sasa,
If that
okay,
is the kind of leaders that we have,
yes,
the kind of leaders that we have that are punitive taxes on companies that are coming to set up,
and
you
that's
know,
why we are
manufacturing
fighting.
industries and all this.
That's
You
why
tell me, everybody right now is running away. Or most of the companies are closing down in Kenya and going to our neighbors in Tanzania and Uganda because of the kind of environment that is there for you to trade. You tell me, until we change the kind of leadership that we have, the type of governance, everything you say, it's so nice. We've tried it. I've gone home for 2 years. I've tried farming, horticulture. I went out of the window, not through the door. I went
But
nicely
let me
there
tell
through
you,
the door.
Francisco,
But when I came
Francisco,
back, I came through the window.
I would like to
So-
hear what Alex
Francisco-
will say about this. Alex,
let me
what
tell
do
you,
you want to say?
Francisco, you know,
Alex, what's
this
your
is why
contribution to this?
this is why the Gen Zs are up in arms. This is the reason. Because they're tired. They're tired of our leaders misappropriating and mismanaging the country and making the, in economics, one of the factors that makes a country to have good economic growth is to have a stable environment, especially a tax regime. The tax regime needs to be stable. Within the past 3 years, we have seen our tax regime change drastically. I mean, it's impossible for you to make a long-term plan in Kenya, meaning this is not a conducive environment for startups, for any kind of company. Companies and multinationals or any investor wants to go into an environment that is stable. Right now, our environment is unpredictable and it is uncertain. You don't know which tax will be introduced next year. You don't know what will happen. It's absolutely tragic, and the people in power do not see this, and that's why the Gen Zs, that's why the millennials who actually now understand how economics work are up in arms.
Thank you.
But you see, the problem there is who? Who is the problem? The leader, who is making those arm of branches, the KRA and all the rest. They
And
become
that's
like
why we want to
cartels.
recall
They
them.
become cartels for him.
That's why
You
we
see?
want to recall them.
If they are taking all these taxes and doing what we want them to do, the things we've spoken about, how we need them to the devolution, how we want them the infrastructure and all this, that is something else. Everyone will be happy to pay the taxes as long as it's going to the right.
We want to end this.
But
sorry.
how do you explain that so many things that you said, nice things, to a government that doesn't care? They're just, Ruto has done everything to make sure everything is taxable. But where is the money going to?
We are going to fix this. We are going to fix this as the Gen Zs and the millennials. Let me tell you, let me just speak one last time, Tom. The way we are going to fix this is by recalling the MPs. The MPs, they owe allegiance to the president. How? This is absolute. I don't want to curse, but how does elected leaders owe allegiance to the president? And yet they're the ones who should be calling out the president and putting him in check, checks and balances. We need to recall those MPs ASAP so that our institutions become independent. The only way the economy can grow is when we have independent institutions. And at the moment, the parliament is the weakest. It's the weak link. I don't even want to talk about the judiciary, but the parliament there is no parliament. We don't have a parliament.
So separation of 3 arms of government is very important. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. That is what is missing. Alex, do you want to say something on this, what Nelson was talking about? Then we'll give the final remarks for everybody. Then we call it a day.
I say that nation.
Your network
is
Alex.
really bad. Network is really bad.
Really?
What? while he's sorting that,
Can you,
one thing you would like to be changed in Kenya. One, not two. One single thing you want changed in Kenya today if you became the president of the country. I start with Francisco.
I think is the way of governing.
Governance.
To be honest, the governance in Kenya is the cause of everything we are going through today. Simple as that.
So you're talking about change of leadership.
Change of everything.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Nelson?
One thing I would change if I was president today is to make sure that I make independent institutions, and after I make independent institutions, to make it a crime punishable by death for any corrupt public leader.
That's a big one. You're Mobutu. You become another Mobutu now. I love that one. Punishment by death. I like that. And that's why you are Gen Z. Can you see where we are heading, Francisco? We are in big trouble. That sentence will come live in everything in Kenya. Okay, Alex, one thing you will change in Kenya, and anything you want to say, then we call it a day.
God, I know my network is very poor, but I think if you ask me today, I would just say we need to document our country's history and ensure that history is a compulsory subject as well as entrepreneurship. Introduce those two topics in school. History to be compulsory and entrepreneurship so that people are socialized to become job creators other than job seekers.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming into this session. I really look forward to seeing you on Sunday, same time. We are likely to have a very significant leader from Kenya who will be answering questions about what is happening in Kenya and general development. Therefore, it's an opportunity for you to come and interact and ask those big questions. Remember, diaspora has not had this opportunity before, and this is being made possible by you guys for being here and also for contributing to this the channel called Uncensored. There has been technical issues at the start, but we are hoping this, because it's a new channel, these teething problems are going to end soon. So asanteni sana. We will share the next topic and also the guests for next session. Otherwise, I really enjoyed your input, really, really insightful, and I can't wait for the next episode. Asanteni and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, Thomas. Have a good night.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you, Nelson and Frank.
Thank you. Thank you.